Imagine a country where summits play with the sky and shift the course of the clouds, where cold and wind together for years have carved the hands and features of the faces, a land whose waters never fail to quench the thirst of an entire continent, and where humans and nature live in harmony. The people of this land are not rich materially. They lack all modern comforts and face eternal hardships. Nature there is extreme and unpredictable. She puts their faith to the test. She is a magician of the heights. But they worship her in return and live in peace. Does this ageless land actually exist? As of today, this country is but a fading dream. Do not let the film fool you. This illusion is maintained by selecting footage of what is left in spite of the Cultural Revolution. To visit this wounded folk is to acknowledge that it is time to act and to change the course of events, because remaining passive is implicitly supporting the genocide. It is not disputed that at different times in this long history, more than 2,000 years, Tibet came under various degrees of foreign influence, that of the Mongols, the Gurkhas of Nepal, the Manchu emperors of China, and the British rulers of India. At other times in Tibet's history, it was Tibet which exercised power and influence on its neighbors, including China. When the People's Liberation Army of China invaded in 1949, Tibet was an independent state in fact and law, a defined territory, a population inhabiting that territory, a government, and the ability to enter into international relations. Soon after the communist victory and the founding of the People's Republic of China in October 1949, Radio Beijing began to announce that the People's Liberation Army must liberate all Chinese territories, including Tibet and Taiwan. A year later, 40,000 Chinese troops attacked and took eastern Tibet's provincial capital of Chamdo. The small Tibetan force, consisting of 8,000 troops, was defeated and half were killed. In April 1951, the Tibetan government sent a 5-member delegation to Beijing, which expressly had no authority to conclude an agreement. Under immense Chinese pressure and threat, the Tibetan delegation signed a 17-point agreement. With China's full knowledge, they had no power to bind the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan government to it. Ever since, China has repeatedly referred to this agreement, among other motives, to justify the entry into Tibet of Chinese forces and the intrusion into external affairs. In June 1959, after his escape to India, the Dalai Lama formally repudiated the 17-point agreement as having been thrust upon the Tibetan government and people by the threat of arms. Until today, China's relentless destruction of religion in Tibet saw the loss of 6,000 monasteries and countless religious artifacts in the name of the Cultural Revolution. Between 1996 and 1998, the Strike Hard campaign saw 492 monks and nuns arrested and tortured, with an additional 9,977 expelled from their religious institutions by the Chinese. Today, in Tibet, it is common to observe arbitrary arrests and detention, possibly due to expressing opinions contrary to Chinese Communist Party ideology. Women subjected to forced sterilization, contraception, and abortion procedures. Tibetan political prisoners below the age of 18, including child monks and nuns. The Tibetans long for freedom in their own land. They wish only to live according to their own rights and customs. They are reduced to a minority in their own home country. Possibly the Tibetan issue goes beyond the fate of the Tibetan people. What if Asia came to realize that it's a shared responsibility to preserve this land where the sources of 5 major rivers in Asia are found? What if the world were to understand that the natural resources of the Tibetan plateau belong to its native inhabitants who daily put into practice their philosophy of compassion and tolerance? When will the world act to create a free China, where Tibetans and other independent cultural groups govern themselves, mirroring the collapse of the Soviet Union? As these images show, a ghost of Tibetan culture still survives in Tibet and is strictly controlled by the occupying Chinese forces, who have been intentionally removed from the frame. The Potala Palace itself is no more than a museum, and the Yogong Temple is a zoo exhibiting some remnants of the Tibetan beliefs and cultures. This film only focuses on what's left of the true Tibet, showing how they still exist. It represents the only way left for Tibetans to keep believing in a free, genuine, independent Tibet. But the day shall come when this footage also will belong to the past, along with the Tibetans and their 2,000-year-old culture based on peaceful compassion and balance.